I never thought love could bloom from hate until she changed my life forever. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. The rain poured down like 1,000 tiny daggers, drenching me to the bone. I stood there, heart pounding, eyes burning with tears that wouldn't fall. The alley was dark, shadows dancing in the corners, whispering secrets I wasn't ready to hear. I felt so lost. So broken. It was like a thick fog had swallowed me whole. And then, through the haze, she appeared. A flash of color in the black and white chaos. Her fiery red jacket flared against the gloom, as if she were a flame in the deepest night. I didn't see her face, just the way the light caught her hair, wild, untamed, like a tempest ready to crash. Somehow, that single moment made everything else fade away. The weight of my past felt so heavy, yet she seemed like a spark, a flicker of hope amidst my despair. In our small town, surrounded by the whispers of judgment and suspicion, my pain was a weight I carried like a shackle. My father, a hard man who wore anger like a second skin, never understood me. I was always the disappointment, the shadow of his expectations. My friends, if I could call them that, were quick to turn their backs when the first rumor spread. But then there was her. She'd stand at the edge of the crowd, eyes searching, as if daring me to reach out. The night my world crumbled was like a bad dream. The fight, the screams, and the shattering glass echoed in my ears. I still remember the moment the ground fell from under me. It was just a few words, thrown like stones. "You'll always be a loser." They shouted, and I felt every syllable stab at my heart. Their laughter hung in the air, so thick and suffocating. But out of that darkness, she came. Unafraid. "Leave him alone." Her voice rang out, slicing through the chaos. We were two damaged souls, bruised by the world, but somehow our pain intertwined. I found myself laughing at her goofy determination, the way her freckled nose crinkled when she smiled. She had this energy that pulled me in, like gravity. My heart began to thaw, little by little. But love felt dangerous. What if the hate flared up again? What if it tore us apart? A chill raced down my spine. I could feel the tension in the air, a storm brewing just beneath the surface. I caught her gaze across the room, and everything else blurred into the background. In that moment, she saw me. The real me. I reached for her, trembling hands barely brushing against hers. But then a loud crash from outside, like thunder breaking the silence. I turned to look, the night splitting open with secrets and shadows. The murmurs of the crowd shifted, their gasps vibrating through the air. Was it another fight? Or something worse? Whatever it was, I knew it would change everything. My heart raced faster, the pulse echoing in my ears. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The chaos outside swelled like a tide, crashing against the fragile calm we had built. With a sense of dread, I stepped toward the door, my heart pounding in tune with the frantic noises. Marissa stood beside me, her wide eyes searching mine. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her that whatever was happening out there could be faced together, but the uncertainty sat like a stone in my throat. Should we see what's going on? She asked, her voice barely audible above the chaos. That I nodded slowly, the weight of her gaze upon me sparking a bravery I didn't know I possessed. Together, we stepped out into the storm, the rain numbing us both, mixing with the sweat of fear that clung to our skin. The street was alive with a thrumming energy, bodies pressing together, shouting words that clawed at the edges of my sanity. In the dim glow of flickering street lamps, I finally saw them, a group huddled together, faces tight with rage, eyes lit like fire. I moved instinctively to shield Marissa, my instinct screaming to protect her, to keep her safe from whatever malevolence was brewing. She gripped my arm tightly, grounding me amid the rising tide of anger that flowed through the crowd like venom. As we drew closer, I realized they were yelling at Summoning, a figure hunched over in defeat. My breath caught in my throat as recognition splashed over me like cold water. It was Danny, my childhood friend, the boy I used to hold in laughter before our worlds diverged into rivalry. He stood there, alone, the target of their malice. Traitor! Someone shouted. You think you can just throw us away, kiss our town goodbye, loser? Another voice spat, and I felt my own heart twist, remembering the times I'd laughed alongside them, embraced their twisted camaraderie. But that was before. Before Danny became the fallen star, and I became the shadow, just praying for acceptance. Marissa stepped forward, her fiery spirit unyielding. Stop it. He's not the enemy. Her words cut through the hostility with an unexpected fierceness, her voice ringing aloud, shaky yet powerful. The crowd turned toward her, and in that moment, I felt the world pause. Who are you to defend him? A girl sneered, her arms crossed defiantly. Someone who believes that hate doesn't make you stronger. Marissa shot back, her eyes blazing. You think you're better than him, but all you're doing is proving how weak you truly are. I felt a swell of admiration rise within me, mixed with something deeper: fear for her safety, trepidation for our growing connection, and pride, so palpable it felt like a warm embrace. But just then, a voice, deeper and crueler than the rest, boomed above us. It was my father. What's going on here? He barked, pushing through the throng, his face a mask of anger and disdain. There he stood, a harsh reminder of every expectation I couldn't meet, every word of disappointment I had come to dread. Dad, wait. I called out, stepping forward to intercept him. Please don't, but he brushed past me, his gaze cold and unforgiving. These losers think they can challenge you? I won't let them disrespect my family. A flash of recognition passed over him as his eyes landed on me, and my heart sank. Before I could process the raging tide of emotions surging within me, fear of losing Marissa, of alienating Danny further, of disappointing my father, a scream pierced the night. It was one of the onlookers, and every head turned, the atmosphere thickening with uncertainty. I glanced back to see Danny crumpling to the ground, a figure lurking at the edge of the crowd, fists raised like a vengeful storm. I felt a jolt of horror clenching my stomach, this moment splintering into a myriad of possible fates. Marissa, I choked out, urgency propelling me forward, but before I could reach them, Danny was on his feet again, the light fading in his eyes, surrounded by a whirlwind of aggression. Stand back! He shouted, and my pulse quickened. I could see the fear in his expression, a mirror of my own, a bond forged not of friendship but of this aching understanding of what it meant to be pursued by shadows of hate. In that brutal second, Marissa reached towards me as if sensing my torment. But the world was slipping away, and a single thought loomed larger than life: could love and hate coexist, or was this a battle destined to consume everything we had? And just like that, the world darkened, and I was left with an unspeakable question hanging heavy in the night air, its answer shrouded in turmoil. The crowd surged, a wave of fists and voices that drowned out all reason. I felt as though I were standing at the edge of an abyss, teetering on the brink as chaos swirled around me. Marissa's fingers tightened around my arm, her presence a flicker of light in the storm. Danny, I shouted, my voice lost among the tumult. I could barely see him through the shifting mass of bodies, but I could feel the weight of despair pressing down on us all. Anger, fear, confusion, it was a toxic cocktail threatening to boil over. Get away! Danny yelled, his voice a raw, jagged edge. The fledgling strength in his tone was quickly suffocated by the chants of the onlookers, a senseless chorus drowning the humanity out of him. A part of me wanted to reach him, to pull him back from the precipice of violence that loomed ahead. But my feet felt anchored to the ground, stuck in the swirling eddies of the moment. Stop. Just stop. Marissa's voice rose above the chaos, trembling yet resolute. The crowd hesitated, a ripple of uncertainty coursing through them as they bled some of their ferocity into confusion. What do you care about him? He's nobody. A boy sneered, shifting on his feet, ready to pounce. Marissa's eyes met mine with a fierce determination. He's somebody to us. He's human. We can't let hatred control us. With that, a collective gasp rippled through the crowd, and in that beat, it was as though time itself stopped, leaving just the raw power of her words to fill the air, but the shock was brief. An older man, his face weathered with age and hardened by decades spent in a town that had turned rancid with bitterness, stepped forward. The eyes that surveyed the scene were filled with dark, unyielding grimness. You think you're some sort of hero? He spat at Marissa, contempt spilling from his lips. He's a traitor to us all. You're just making things worse. I glimpsed the terrified look on Danny's face, his breath coming fast. My heart ached for him, for the boy I had once laughed with in carefree innocence. The boy who had become a man desperate to escape the darkness he had fallen into, now caught in the crossfire of misplaced loyalty. Someone step in and put him in his place. The words slashed through me, and before I could process my next move, I lunged, desperation clawing at my insides. Stop it. My voice, amplified by panic, sliced through the noise, finally reaching Danny. You don't have to be alone. I stepped into the pocket of tension, placing myself between him and the gathering storm. Danny's eyes flashed with something, perhaps surprise, perhaps a flicker of hope. What are you doing? He demanded, urgency thickening his words. Fighting for you, I responded, vulnerability spilling from my lips. The crowd recoiled, startled by my defiance, the tension palpable. But it was Marissa who stepped closer, her presence strong beside me. We're not going to let you go down without a fight, Danny. We're with you, she echoed, her voice threading a promise into the fabric of the moment. A flicker of something shifted inside Danny, a vulnerability that left him trembling. Unexpected kindness seeped through the ferocious exterior of the mob. Through the harshness of their jabs, I glimpsed faces softening as they saw three young souls standing against their collective hate, a contrast so stark to the madness swirling around us, but just beyond that flicker, I could see it growing darker. My father's voice boomed again, cutting through the underlying tension. You disgrace this family by siding with him. His words lashed at me, and I felt as if I were being torn between duty and heart. Please. I implored, tears stinging my eyes. This isn't who we are. We can choose something different. However, his face hardened, each line carved deeper into his skin, a map of pride conflicting with the weight of loyalty and a decade of molded expectations. Kicking up a tempest, I felt dread pool in my stomach, a realization that his shadow loomed heavier with each breath I took, and then a movement caught my eye, someone darting through the fringes of the crowd. A figure that wasn't familiar yet felt oddly significant. My gut clenched as I recognized the bold stance, the unwavering conviction in the shoulders. Could it be? In the next moment, she emerged from the shadows, her familiar face casting a surreal quality to the moment. It was Lily, Danny's younger sister. We had been inseparable in childhood, before everything had changed. Stop! She cried out, her voice striking a chord of authority that turned heads. You don't know what you're doing. This isn't justice, it's just hate cloaked in righteousness. Before I could respond, the crowd shifted again, discontent brewing beneath the surface. I could sense that our moment of solidarity was dangling by a thread, the angry murmurs of the crowd threatening to tear apart the fragile unity we had forged. Danny! Lily shouted, her eyes locking onto her brother. In her expression was a tempest of wrath, love, and desperation, all tumultuous yet unyielding. You are not alone. We will fight for you, Lily. Danny's voice cracked, the dichotomy of joy and fear flooding through him. But just as hope filled the air like spring rain, a sudden explosion from within the throng tore through the moment, shouts ringing out like a gunshot. I turned to see fists raised, chaos unfurling before our eyes once more. The world spun, a wild tornado threatening to upend everything we had just fought for. And at that moment, I realized the depth of the battle we faced wasn't merely against hate, but also against the years of hurt that bound us all. Then, with a sickening rush of adrenaline, I saw Marissa step forward, her fingers moving through the chaos, seeking connection. "We can change this," she cried, but I knew deep down that we were fighting against something far larger than hatred alone, and the very essence of our small stand might just dissolve into another wave of darkness. And in the heart of it all, through the cacophony of emotions, a chilling thought whispered through me: could love truly bloom amidst this tumbling tide of hate, or were our hearts destined to get crushed under the weight of history? The crowd surged again, a relentless tide that threatened to drown us under its fury. I felt the surge of bodies pressing close, anxiety rising as I clung to Marissa and Lily, each of us anchored in the tempest of emotion. My heart raced, fear clenched around it like a vice. How could we withstand such hatred, let alone hope to overcome it? "Danny!" Lily shouted again, her voice a piercing note that found its way through the chaos. "Look at me. You're not just a target, you're our brother, our friend. We won't let them take you from us." Her words were a lifebuoy tossed into the stormy sea, but I could see the glimmer of doubt flickering in Danny's eyes, teetering between desperation and despair. "He's my brother by blood but a traitor by choice." My father's voice cut through the madness again, a cold blade slicing through my heart. "To side with him is to turn your back on everything we believe in, but what if everything you believe in is wrong?" Marissa shot back, her voice trembling yet fierce. "What if there's strength in unity instead of division? You are tearing this family apart." A gasp rippled through the crowd, shock transforming into murmurs. I could feel the tide shifting slightly, hearts wavering, and I held on to that flicker of hope. "Remember us, Dad?" I urged, desperation spilling from my lips. "Remember the summer we spent at the lake? How we laughed and danced under the stars? That's who we are." But his hardened eyes showed no sign of recognition, just a stonewall of anger. The turmoil among the crowd thickened, and every soul seemed caught in a dichotomy of feeling love, hatred, and fear swirling like a maelstrom. Suddenly, a hand found mine warm and steady. I turned to find Marissa's eyes, filled with a fierce determination that made my breath hitch. "We can do this together, for Danny and for us," she whispered fiercely. A swell of emotion rose in me, binding the fragile hope we held on to. United, we faced the crowd, our presence a small fortress nestled amongst the confusion. But I could feel a crack forming in the foundation of belief that had long held this town together. Just then, a bellowing roar echoed from the back of the throng. "This is not over." A man I didn't recognize surged forward, rage evident in every step. "We will not allow betrayal to fester. There is no place for traitors here." Fear clutched at my throat. "No!" I cried out, desperate to halt his advance. But he charged through, a human battering ram ready to explode. Then, unexpectedly, it happened. A voice, small yet firm, rose up from the crowd. "Stop. Just stop." In a moment that felt like time had shattered, the figure stepped forward. It was Mrs. Reynolds, our old teacher, her kind smile bolstered by the weight of authority. "This is not how we solve our problems. You can't fight hate with more hate. We must learn to love despite our differences." The crowd hesitated, caught between Mrs. Reynolds' unwavering strength and the growing tide of anger. I could see people exchanging glances, the fire in their eyes dimming, replaced by uncertainty. "Remember when we read about change?" she continued, her voice gentle yet resolute. "About standing for one another, even when times are tough? This is exactly that moment." From somewhere in the back, a woman stepped forward, her tears glistening in the chaos. "I lost my son to this anger. He was nothing but love, and now he's gone. It must end." A tremor of vulnerability swept through the crowd, hearts cracked open by her raw pain. The simmering animosity began to ebb like the tide receding, leaving confusion and compassion in its wake. And yet, just when I thought a glimmer of hope might take root from the shards of despair, the storm surged back with renewed ferocity. An outburst erupted, a cascade of primal emotions that threatened to engulf us all. "Shut up," someone screamed, anger poisoning the air like a deadly gas. "Well, show you what happens when you side with him." The word struck hard, and I felt the people around me shifting like a wild animal sensing danger. A hand reached out to me, breaking through the thick dread lilies, grounding me in a torrent of emotion. "We have to stand firm," she said, determination painting her features. "We can't let this divide us. We're stronger together." But then a horrific realization jolted through me like electricity. In my other hand, I felt Marissa, her grasp turning weak with fear. I turned to her and found that hope I had seen within her now briefly flickering like a dying ember. "Danny, I need you to be strong," she said beneath her breath, heartbreak lacing her voice. Before I could respond, turmoil erupted anew, fists flying as lines were drawn, pushing the boundaries of trust to the brink of chaos. Bodies clashed, and pain flooded the air. "Danny!" Marissa shouted, suddenly stumbling backward, momentarily giving in to panic. I turned to grasp her shoulder, but my eyes widened as I saw the treacherous gaze locked onto hers from across the fray. My father, the storm within him was only amplifying, burning a path toward devastation. "Get away from her!" I roared, my heart pounding as realization crashed over me like a tidal wave. In that horrifying moment, just as I prepared to spring into action, something shattered, a figure falling to the ground, a small crack fracturing the chaos, revealing a truth I had never wanted to witness. It was Danny, crumpling under the weight of it all, and as time halted, I felt certainty cascade through me. This battle would cost everything: friendships, family, and perhaps even the very essence of who we were. But at that instant, where acceptance of mutual loss danced with the possibility of rebuilding, I had never felt the fragility of love and hope more acutely. As I dove toward Danny, the echoes of compassion clashing with hate rang out loud, leaving me to grapple with the heart-wrenching question: how could we ever hope to heal in a world where love was so easily overruled by despair? The crowd's cacophony enveloped me, a deafening chorus of shouts and cries that seemed to echo the turmoil in my own heart. I felt the earth tremble beneath my feet, and in that moment, time warped and slowed, painting a vivid tableau of desperation and conflict. As I sank to my knees beside Danny, his crumpled body weary against the unforgiving ground, the world around us morphed into a vortex of chaos that threatened to swallow us whole. "Danny, please!" I choked out, my own voice breaking as I reached for his face, brushing away the dirt that clung to his skin. Was it bruises I felt beneath my fingertips? A surge of anger coiled tightly in my gut as I could only picture my father's grim face, the embodiment of everything that had fostered this conflict. "Focus on me," Danny whispered, his voice hoarse and shaky, but there was a flicker of light in his eyes that reminded me of who he used to be, a boy who shared laughter and dreams under the same sky. "You have to make them listen. Don't let them tear us apart." Before I could respond, the heat of the crowd surged again, a wave of adrenaline igniting my fear, pushing me to stand. But just as I straightened, a figure emerged from the murky distance: Mrs. Reynolds, weaving through the unrest with a grace that seemed almost unreal amid the turmoil. Her presence was a lifeline thrown into deep waters, and the crowd's anger began to wane, uncertainty glinting in their eyes as she drew nearer. "People," she called out, her voice a steadfast anchor in the storm. "What you are fighting for are more than just beliefs. You are fighting against yourselves." She positioned herself between my father and us, standing tall, unwavering. In her eyes, I saw an unyielding commitment to every lesson she had ever taught us about empathy, love, and unity. "Look around you," she exclaimed, gesturing to the many faces, fears, and hopes that mingled in the backdrop of violence. "This rage, this division, it's not who we are. It's a reflection of what we let divide us. Hatred is a stranger to love, so let us rebuild that which has been shattered." In this flickering moment of pause, I noticed a few familiar faces softening: the Blaine siblings, who had often stood beside me in the classroom, now lingering at a distance but with apprehensive glances aimed toward their own parents, uncertainty weaving through the tight clutches of family loyalty. Could love be rekindled in the empty gaps where resentment had taken root? And yet, from the far end of the crowd, a low growl reverberated, an omen of frustration unfurling as my father's lips tightened into a grim line. "You are foolish, Mrs. Reynolds. Love is a weakness. If we allow this betrayal to fester, it will stretch beyond our town. It is a cancer that must be excised." Her composure was resolute, and I felt my breath catch in my throat. "No, sir. Love is the remedy. True strength lies not in exclusion, but in embracing one another in our shared humanity." The words sparked a ripple through the throng, the palpable tension shifting. But behind that shifting tide, I could feel the brewing storm of anger poised to erupt again. The wounds that lay buried were resting back to the surface under the weight of truth and the promise of acceptance. And I feared that with every passing moment, the light we had fought for was waning. Suddenly, a scream pierced the air, fracturing the fragile hope we held on to. "Hey!" yelled a boy from near the outskirts. "We need to go home before it's too late." His vulnerability fell upon the crowd like a thunderclap, and in the moments that followed, the energy of collective uncertainty returned, spiraling into chaos once more. "See! They want to abandon our beliefs," my father shouted, eyes blazing. "They want to betray the love of our community. Do not listen to them." Why was he unable to see? Why couldn't he recognize the humanity crying out for acknowledgement and unity? The longer he pushed, the more I felt my resolve hardening, refusing to bend to his will any longer. "Danny, we have to fight for each other," I shouted, desperately casting a glance back at him, determination igniting a flame low in my core. "We can't allow them to manipulate our hearts with fear. We are not just a family, we are a community built on love." And just as I finished, the shattering reality stabbed me in the chest. The clamor of fists and throaty roars crescendoed into a symphony of man-made hatred that clawed at my skin. As the crowd surged once more, pushing and pulling with renewed ferocity, I grabbed Danny's arm, pulling him with me toward safety, but as we stumbled backward, desperate for escape, I felt something break the last remnants of the bridge connecting love and family torn asunder. In that moment, eyes locked with my father's, each of us standing on opposing shores, the truth hit with a cruel finality. We had become enemies in this struggle for souls. In the haunting silence that followed, I turned to Danny just as Mrs. Reynolds shouted again, "This is a chance for all of us. For healing to take place. Don't let your pain silence your love." And in that second, I realized the gulf that now lay between us could not be bridged by mere words. The faces I had once cherished were now unrecognizable, lined with distrust, anger, and fear. Just then, in that raw, suspended moment, the unthinkable struck me like a bolt of lightning. Perhaps it wasn't just about Danny or my father. Perhaps the walls had risen so high pillars of hope could not breach them. With a swiftness that seemed unreal, my vision blurred around the edges as chaos roared back to life, an embodiment of everything we feared. Somehow, in the depths of my heart, I sensed that the fight was just beginning. What was to come would test us beyond our wildest fears and our most profound joys. As the weight of despair thickened the air, a new voice emerged from the depths of the crowd. "It doesn't have to be this way." A figure pushed through at the forefront, one I recognized but hadn't anticipated. "I found a way to unite us, one small act of kindness at a time. Together, we can break down the walls that hate has built." Hope surged within me as I stared at the source of this unexpected revelation, my world fracturing yet again amid a growing sense of urgency. I could hardly believe my eyes. It was someone from my past, someone I never imagined could hold the key to all of this, Jamie, the one person I thought lost forever to the shadows of conflict. "I'm not here as a soldier, but as someone fighting for love," he bellowed, and in that moment, the possibility of redemption flickered back to life. The fight had transformed, but would Jamie's bravery be enough to weave together the torn threads of our lives, or would another wave of anger crash down upon us before we could ever grasp it? Standing there in that storm, holding Danny close with uncertainty festering in the heart, I whispered the words that echoed in a quiet murmur beneath the chaos, "One act of kindness at a time." But what lay ahead remained a haunting enigma, a bittersweet reminder that love and hate could reside in the same heart, waiting to shape our ultimate fate. The remnants of the crowd's uproar faded slightly, brought low by the mingling threads of uncertainty and hope. Jamie's presence had planted a seed in my heart, but fear quickly overshadowed my aspirations. How could one voice among so many possibly hold the power to transform the tide? Yet, as I watched him, standing firm amidst our fractured community, I felt a crack within myself, Widena longing to join him, to stand in solidarity against the chaos encroaching on our lives. Danny, we need to support him, I urged, my voice a fragile whisper, laced with the tremors of my own doubt. Danny's gaze flickered to Jamie, searching, but he nodded, a flicker of attachment igniting in his eyes. The decision to step forward now seemed like a fragile choice, a line drawn in the quicksand of loyalty and love. Before I could take another step, though, another scream echoed through the air, sending ripples of alarm racing through the crowd. Someone's hurt. A girl shouted from the perimeter. We need help. Her voice, laced with fear, cut through the unwillingness of our community to listen, and I felt a swoop of dread as I turned my head to see a figure on the ground, one of my classmates, strangled by panic, crumpled against the asphalt, surrounded by eager hands not wielding kindness but confusion. The moment shattered the feeble truce, and chaos surged back to life as the collective mass of our emotions collided again, the cries of pain igniting the sparks of anger still raw and seething in the hearts of those present. I watched helplessly as others rushed to the injured, their intentions noble but steeped in a frenzied desperation that reflected my father's outspoken anger. This isn't right. We should stand and fight. A voice exploded, drawing shouts of agreement from those still menacingly circling us. The ebb and flow of our shared humanity seemed all but lost in the pulsing fury that wound through the crowd. Focus. Jamie commanded, stepping forward into the eye of the storm with the kind of steel resolve I had always admired. Pointing fingers won't heal our wounds, compassion will. We need to help, not engage in violence. There was a fire in his eyes, an echo of the truth we all harbored deep down, but maybe we'd buried it too far to recover it. As spectators began to hesitate, glancing back and forth between the injured classmate and the gathering storm of emotions swirling around them, I took a cautious step forward. You're right, Jamie. We're all hurting, but we can change this together. The words fell from my lips, trembling yet resolute, as I reached for Danny's hand, his fingers intertwined with mine, his grip firming as I looked into his eyes. I saw fear reflected there, but there was something else too, a flicker of belief that urged us to press forward as one. Just like before, I whispered, recalling our shared moments when dreams were still within our grasp. We can spark hope. Be the change, Danny. The glances from others softened, shifting from belligerent anger to tentative curiosity. And in that small, unwavering moment, I felt the crowd diverting from vengeance toward the malleable threads of compassion. The very hope Jamie had spoken of mingled with the fear coursing through my veins, a tenuous peace throbbing softly beneath the simmering rage. Just as I began to believe in the potential for kindness to unravel the knot of hate gnawed at our hearts, a voice rang out from the shadows. No more love for the traitors. They've already betrayed us. It was my father, cutting through the impromptu truce like a blade, every word dripping with venom, aimed squarely at Jamie, Danny, and me. No. You don't understand, Dad. I implored, the heaviness of the moment pressing down on me like a ton of bricks. This isn't betrayal, this is about healing. Lies. He roared, taking a step forward, his fists clenched, the lines of fury deepening on his face. We are strong, we do not need to feel. Love is a distraction. It is weakness. As he spoke, the crowd's unity began to splinter. The fractures widened, anger surged among my peers, igniting conversations that turned to accusations. I could see the Blaine siblings retreating, their family torn between loyalty to my father and the heart-splintering awareness of injustice bubbling beneath the surface. Betrayal is exactly what you're perpetuating. Jamie yelled back boldly, not wavering. You preach strength while chaining the very souls of your community. Weakness is allowing fear to dictate our lives, to dictate our relations. The air grew thick with the weight of emotion, and I could feel the students around us beginning to lean in, fingers twitching in anticipation, caught between two worlds ripped by the fierce winds of convergence. Yet a bond was threading together under our shared courage, moments of tender kindness were igniting the fire that love promised to burn bright. That I took another step forward, unwilling to withdraw no matter the risk. You taught us that standing up for each other is where true strength lies. Why are you forsaking it for these walls? At that moment, a hushed tone swept through the crowd, followed by an acute silence, the sort of silence before a storm, where everything hangs on the precipice. But within that silence, a new cry emerged in the distance, sharper and louder, coursing through the mounting tension like a volatile spark. Help! Someone help me! And suddenly, a figure pushed through the throng, a young girl whom I recognized too well, urgency etched across her face. We found something. A message. They're coming. The ones who divided us are coming back. Before my mind could fathom the implications of her words, before I could even breathe, fear surged anew, the very air alive with unpredictability. As the contours of hope began to twist and fold back into the familiar grip of fear, Jamie's voice cut through the tension once more, steady and galvanizing. This is the moment we must choose. Will we come together and bridge this divide, or will we allow ourselves to disintegrate under the weight of fear? As I looked at Danny beside me, and back to Jamie's call for unity, I realized with growing urgency that our world was teetering on the edge of an unfathomable precipice. We have to decide now. The pulse of uncertainty thrummed wildly in my chest, and I could barely remember how it felt to grasp anything other than doubt, but the truth settled heavy within me. Whatever lay ahead demanded courage, demanded love, and as the world threatened to fold in on itself, I realized that only together could we begin to unravel the chaos that hatred had stitched into our hearts. And as I stepped forward alongside Danny, my heart whispered that the power of our shared humanity might just be able to silence the approaching storm. But as night encroached, uncertainty gnawed at the corners of my heart. Because love's rebirth was an obstacle course I was unsure we could navigate, and as the cries of fear echoed louder, I could feel the impending darkness drawing nearer, threatening to extinguish the very flickers of hope we had valiantly fought to ignite. The echoes of the girl's urgent plea settled heavily in the tense atmosphere, drawing our collective focus away from the escalating argument and towards the new threat she had revealed. Whispers of uncertainty cascaded around me as eyes widened with fear. I caught a glimpse of Danny's clenched jaw, his hands still firmly intertwined with mine, a grounding reminder that I wasn't standing alone in this maelstrom. That we need to listen, I urged, my voice barely breaking through the tide of confusion. The girl stood firm, drawing in a shaky breath, her wide eyes darting to the crowd, seeking support for what she was about to reveal. They're coming back, she repeated with desperation, clutching a tattered piece of paper, the edges frayed as if it had been crumpled and smoothed too many times. I found this. It's a list of names. People they want to target. A wave of murmurs surged through those gathered. Scanning the crowd, I could feel the shifting undercurrents of paranoia and protectiveness emerging, mirrored in the strained faces of those who stood closest to the front. Jamie stepped forward again, his brow knitted with concern as he reached toward the girl, his expression a calm yet urgent plea for her to continue. Who are they? He asked, the authority in his voice urging her on. They call themselves the Defenders. They don't want us to come together, they thrive on our chaos. Her voice cracked slightly, but she pressed on, fear shifting to grim determination. They think love makes us weak and are ready to do whatever it takes to keep us from standing united. The name reverberated through me like a bell tolling a distant warning. The Defenders. I had heard whispers about them, a shadow group dedicated to maintaining division, sewn deeply into the fabric of our fractured community. The weight of their presence had lingered beyond the shadows, a specter of threats lingering just out of sight, causing unrest. Why didn't you come sooner? Another voice from the crowd challenged, tinged with suspicion and anger, the facade of bravado slipping as the stakes mounted. Because I was scared. She cried, fists clenched at her sides. Scared of what they'd do if they found out I knew. Scared of what I would have to do if I was targeted. But I couldn't just stay quiet any longer. The intensity of her words ignited a flicker of understanding in the crowd, recognition of our shared fears. Danny gripped my hand tighter, as if he could somehow shield me from the portentous reality unfolding around us. My mind raced. The fractures in our community were on the verge of widening, but maybe, just maybe, amidst the darkness, there was room for a flicker of light. Jamie's gaze shifted between the girl and the audience. We can't let fear dictate our action. We have to stand together now more than ever. If we allow ourselves to be splintered by these threats, we'll be playing into their hands. But as if in retaliation, a collective bitterness blossomed with voices echoing from the back, forming a wall of resentment against Jamie's insistence. Why should we trust you? A boy shouted, the fervor of distrust growing with every heartbeat. You want us to disarm ourselves, to open up, while they're plotting against us. The question hung palpably in the air, forcing us to confront our deepest fears. The idyllic image of unity painted by Jamie began to feel fragile amidst the shadows cast by the defender's threat. Because unity is our best weapon. Jamie rebutted, though the edge in his voice hinted at the fragile nature of his resolve. I stood frozen, caught between the escalating tension and my own swirling thoughts. The notion of camaraderie felt like a necessary risk, but what if unity was merely an illusion? What if it opened us to greater vulnerability? Look at the girl, we're all scared, I pushed in, my voice imbuing urgency into the growing frustration. This isn't just about Jamie's vision, it's about fighting back against the darkness harnessed within us. It's about our survival. The girl looked at me, her eyes glinting with disbelief and relief. Yes. Together we can expose the defenders, show them that they've underestimated us. Hope crackled in the air momentarily, but quickly flickered as my father's voice interjected fiercely, thick with disdain. You think love can save you? Look at what it has done to you, foolishness. It makes you soft. The chants of agreement from the divided side of the assembly rose around him like a tide, clashing against the whispered courage sprouting in pockets near Jamie and me. The crowd roiled, tossed on the waves of conflicting emotions, confusion, hope, anger like a gnashing beast unleashed amongst us. In the midst of the volcanic emotions, I noticed the Blaine siblings, their faces twisted in uncertainty, caught between loyalty to my father and a deeper yearning for something more. I reached for them, feeling despair clawing at my chest. Whatever hope that existed could float away, but they were a tether worth holding on to. Please, don't let anger be your compass. I cried, desperation tinging my words. Together we are stronger, but apart, we only give them the power to break us. And just as my gaze locked onto theirs, a scream pierced through the din from somewhere on the periphery of our congregation. It was sharp, more visceral, dragging us into the realm of cold chaos yet again. Help! They're here. The defenders are here. The commotion escalated. The joyful flickers of hope threatened to be extinguished as we rushed to assess the danger. The raw, collective dread manifesting in panicked exclamations as people began to pull away, seeking shelter from the emerging chaos. I turned toward Jamie, feeling a rush of urgency, the flicker of hope dangerously flickering in the face of fear. We have to stick together, but something shifted in Jamie's eyes, and he shook his head. This isn't just about us anymore. Whatever's coming, we need to ensure everyone survives. In that moment, I realized the depth of our impending fate and how quickly the strands of hope could weave back into the fabric of despair. As I glimpsed the swelling sea of bodies around us, ethereal threads spun between unity and division. We could become warriors for love's sake, or we could fade away into the night, shadows to the darkness that threatened our very existence. Don't leave me, I whispered, dread pooling within me as I faced the open maw of the approaching fear. But as the girl's shaking voice erupted from within the chaos, proclaiming warnings unseen, I felt the overwhelming urge for connection, but the shadows now blurred the lines of choices made. I could see the fissures in our community widening as we prepared to antagonize against an invisible foe, uncertain if our love could truly bloom from a ground so thick with hate. In that moment of impending hopelessness, a shocking realization unspooled within me: the defenders weren't merely outside, they lived within the hearts and minds of our own people. And as we all stood on the precipice of a storm, the last flicker of hope dimmed against the encroaching darkness, leaving my heart to tremble dangerously close to surrender. The scream echoed in my ears, an ominous cacophony that signified the rupture of the precarious alliance I had tried to cultivate. Panic coursed through the crowd like wildfire, igniting a frantic energy that overtook every thought of solidarity. I could feel the warmth of Danny's fingers slip from mine as people surged forward, their instinct to flee overpowering any belief in standing strong together. He was right, I thought as uncertainty crept back, threading through my resolve. My father's voice laced with bitterness, ringing true in the face of unfolding chaos seemed to reverberate within me, reaffirming every doubt I clutched tightly. Does love really make us weak? But even in the storm of doubt, something deeper clawed at me, a whisper of truth amidst the chaos. The girl, the one who had first rallied us with her fragile courage, was still at the edge of the crowd, trembling as she attempted to raise her voice against the tide of fear. I could see the resolve glimmering in her eyes, a fire ignited even as the winds of despair howled around us. "Stay together," she shouted. "They want us divided. We can't let them win." I fixed my gaze on her, the intensity of her conviction radiating warmth in an otherwise suffocating chill. This was not the time to buckle. I pushed through the tumultuous crowd, finding my way back to her side. Danny's hand found mine again, and I could feel the hope shifting, but it was a delicate thread that could snap with the slightest tremor. "Listen to her," I echoed, raising my voice above the din of commotion. "We hold the power here, together. The defenders can't break us if we refuse to live in fear." It was achingly palpable, the tension hung heavy as those caught in the crossfire hesitated, eyes darting between the girl and my pleading face. It felt like grasping at shadows, but I had to try. Meanwhile, chaos swirled as a handful of figures emerged from the gloom, shrouded in dark attire, faces obscured by masks that gleamed in the sparse light like sinister stars. "Lies," one of them bellowed, cutting through the fluttering breaths of anticipation with a cutting precision. "You think you can unify? You are nothing more than a fracture waiting to collapse." The truth in his words struck like a whip against the fragile bonds we were trying to piece together. I gasped, feeling the collective shiver of the crowd at that moment, a disillusionment creeping through the hearts of those who dared to hope. But just as despair threatened to blossom, one of the Blaine siblings stepped forward, a defiant spark igniting in their eyes. "No. We are more than that. We are not weak, we're powerful together." A few murmurs arose in agreement, small ripples of courage forming amidst the waves of dread. Those behind Jamie stirred, nudged by the light of newfound conviction. It wasn't a tide turning against the defenders, but rather a flickering of solidarity battling darkness. That I felt urgency coiling within me, the realization that the small moments of courage across the crowd could align into a radiant force. "We can't let them have that power," I shouted, eyes scanning the faces of those who lingered, fear knitted together with threads of hope as I implored them. "We've felt with anguish, the loneliness together. We can change this. Let's show them who we really are." With every plea, I could see a bridge form, lifelines connecting the scattered segments, those who dared to embrace the love we felt, who clung to the notion of what it meant to belong, despite the shadows hanging like vultures above us. Then, amidst this fragile reconnection, I felt a tremor run through the air, a sharp break in the moment as shadows danced closer, revealing more figures until it was evident the defenders weren't merely a few, they were a faction moving in hostile intent. Suddenly, a new fear ignited in my chest. "They won't just stand by, they want to conquer us," I warned. Panic surged again as the defenders advanced, their intentions crystal clear and menacing. When one stepped closer, raising a hand in a gesture that threatened to shatter the delicate atmosphere we had just begun to rebuild, I braced myself, my heart racing in rhythm with the rising tide of dread. But then, out of nowhere, there was a surge of movement from the back. A wave of people surged forward, their faces half hidden, yet unmistakably united. "You will not erase us," they shouted, wielding makeshift shields, an unexpected symbol of defiance. The sight sent tremors through the crowd. Our community was waking up, shaking off the shadows of doubt. It was as though compassion broke loose from its chains, rising to meet the encroaching storm. As a profound sense of purpose washed over us, I felt a sudden push at my back. I turned to see a figure slip through the gathering chaos, their intent obscured, but my heart dropped as recognition hit like a sledgehammer. No, it couldn't be her. before I could gather my thoughts, a sharp gasp escaped me as I locked eyes with my younger sister, Eva, the girl I had endured everything for, and there she was, standing defiantly amidst the encroaching darkness as she faced the forces of division, the electric charge between us undeniable. "Eva!" I shouted, panic laced into my voice, but she didn't flinch. Steely determination graced her features. Then, just as a scream rippled through the air and darkness engulfed the arena, I witnessed the glimmer of resolve transform into a fearsome wave, crashing towards the defenders with a ferocity I had never seen before. My heart alternated between exhilaration and terror as I watched them come, the boundary of love and rage collapsing into a singularity, our community on the brink of either salvation or destruction. But the moment sharpened with alarming clarity as I felt something deeper, the realization that Eva was the embodiment of everything good I had fought for, yet she seemed drawn into this tempest that I, and that heart-stopping moment, the essence of our unyielding betrayal hovered in the air, leaving behind an agonizing question: what line was I willing to cross to protect those I loved? Would love truly bloom out of the hate that surrounded us, or would we become consumed, haunted by choices made in desperation? The answers lingered just out of reach, and as the shadows surged forth, I could feel our last threads of hope slip dangerously close to fraying against the night. In the chaos, time seemed to dilate, stretching each heart-pounding second into a miniature eternity. As I watched Eva charge toward the array of masked figures, a potent mixture of pride and fear roiled within me. She had always been the brave one between us, but she was also still so young. My protective instincts surged to the surface, ripping through the shell of uncertainty I had so carefully crafted. "Eva, stop!" I cried out, but my voice was swallowed by the frenzy surrounding us. I could see pieces of her spirit flickering in the heat of the moment, the unapologetic vibrancy that had always lit up our small, shared world. Yet now, she stood forged against a darkness that threatened to extinguish that light. It gripped my heart with foreboding. Moments ago I had felt the power of unity winding through us like an invisible tether, but now I feared all that hope was rapidly unraveling. Danny's fingers clutched mine tighter, his eyes wide with dread as he turned toward me, seeking answers I had no way of giving. The tension between us erupted into a chasm of anxiety, a wordless acknowledgement that we were teetering on the edge of something profound and dangerous. As the defenders tightened their formation, I noticed a flicker of movement amongst them, a flash of familiarity that stirred the inner turmoil gnawing at my core. I squinted through the haze of shadows and saw him. It was Thomas, one of my father's closest allies, a man whose presence had loomed large in my childhood. I couldn't make sense of it. Thomas was supposed to be standing on the side of hope, not with those who thrived on chaos. My heart sank as I questioned how far his influence stretched and who truly held the reins of this conflict. "Why are you doing this?" I dared to shout, shifting my focus to him, aware of the growing acceleration of my own pulse. "How can you side with those who wish to tear us apart?" His gaze bore into mine, unwavering as a cruel smile twisted his lips. "You still don't get it, do you? This isn't about division. It's about control, and power is something you can't simply wish away with love or courage." Bitter irony stung my tongue, his words felt like splinters lodged deep. Here was someone who had chosen to ignore the very thing I clung to, the idea that community might transcend hatred. Just then, in a stunning display of unity, those on our side surged forward with renewed vigor, chanting defiantly, "We are one. We are whole." Their voices melded together like a living tapestry, one fueled by fear yet dipped in hope, forming a wall against the encroaching darkness. But the closeness felt more tentative than before. Fragments of lingering doubt began to torment me with questions that felt too vast to answer. "Together, we can overcome this." I strained to project, even as the chaos threatened to consume me. Every act of compassion ignites change. Every ounce of love adds another layer of strength. As if by some unspoken cue, my words appeared to resonate within the crowd. I saw familiar faces glistening with resolve, a blend of determination and fear that mirrored my own. Somewhere amidst the pulsing energy, I noticed the girl who stood at the forefront, her emerald eyes gleaming defiantly in the face of adversity. She had sparked this flicker of hope, yet now I felt the weight of the responsibility pressing down upon her shoulders. But Eva surged ahead again, drawn closer to danger. Rage ignited a fire inside of me. I darted forward, anchored by the strength of our connection, the frantic rhythm of my heartbeat synchronized with the chaos around me until I reached her, grasping her wrist firmly. "Don't. Please, this isn't the way," I urged, my voice thick with desperation. For a moment, bewilderment flickered across her face, as if a wall had suddenly shattered, revealing the uncertainty that lay hidden behind her steely facade. "You don't understand. This is our chance. We can't allow them to divide us. You have to trust me." But a new cry broke through the air, jarring both of us back into reality. The defenders had begun to close in, escalating the confrontation towards a boiling point, and just as they surged forward, I felt a surge of clarity. In that moment, I realized that the encroaching shadows wouldn't claim us easily. Standing in that tempest, we could either unite or perish, love or succumb to hatred. Yet, within this emotional maelstrom, the looming presence of a darker future threatened to crush all our dreams. "Then let's unite. As one," I shouted back, locking my eyes with hers as our fingers intertwined, a symbol of trust that transcended the storm raging around us. But just as hope unfurled its wings, Thomas stepped closer, raising a hand as shadows danced behind him, ready to unleash their wrath. "Unity?" He laughed cruelly, the sound shrill and taunting. "You think this is about love? Unity can only exist if you know how to wield real power. Let's see if your little rebellion can withstand what's coming." And just like that, a hush settled over the gathered crowd, shock rippling through like a wave. I could feel the collective dread clawing at my throat as realization seized my ear. That held something in that moment, something that could unravel everything we had fought for. "Everyone, get back!" I screamed, pushing Eva away from the impending danger, but it was too late. The ground thundered beneath us, but it was his next words, tumbling like stones down a precipice, that ignited a spark of betrayal, igniting fear. "You'll wish you had chosen differently." And just as he uttered those words, blinding light erupted from behind the defenders, casting shadows long and treacherous. I gasped, feeling the ground tremor beneath us, uncertainty mingling with disbelief, and a new conflict blossom, a revelation that cracked open the walls we had so painstakingly built. As scattered gasps escaped the crowd, their fearful eyes mingling with my own, I felt the world teetering on the brink of an abyss. Would this be our last stand against darkness, an irrevocable decision that would splinter us apart forever? The shadows cast long, reminding me we still had a choice to make, and just then, I realized the truth within my heart: love indeed had the power to create or to destroy. But would it endure the onslaught of what loomed ahead? In that moment of blinding chaos, the world felt suspended between fear and possibility. Our community stood on the precipice of something terrifying yet deeply profound. I turned to Eva, her eyes wide with uncertainty that mirrored my own, and I knew we had to confront the unfamiliar together. "Together," I whispered, squeezing her hand as the echoes of Thomas' mocking laughter ricocheted through my mind like gunfire. As the blinding light faded into a hazy outline behind the advancing shadows, I took a deep breath, sucking in the cool night air that carried a thick tension with it. With every heartbeat hammering against my chest, I could feel the gravity of the moment pressing down. A chronic fear hovered just beyond our reach. Before any of us could react, Thomas issued the first strike. A blinding ripple of energy surged outward from his outstretched hand, catching everyone in its path. I instinctively pulled Eva close, shielding her as best as I could, my heart racing with a dual sense of protection and dread. The ground shook beneath us like it was responding to the very fabric of our emotions, trembling with the weight of all the hurts and hopes we had ever faced. In that chaos, an unexpected alliance formed as people began to lift their voices in solidarity. "We won't let this happen," someone shouted, their voice rising above the deafening roar. The crowd split, creating a chasm of closely knit warriors gathered on either side, united by a common yearning for love, acceptance, and healing, while simultaneously torn apart by mistrust and fear loomed on the other. "Stand up for each other," another voice pierced through, and in that galvanizing moment, I felt a spark, igniting deep within the communal heart. "Do not give in to their anger," Jamie shouted, standing at the forefront with fierce determination, his presence flickering with fierce grace amid the turbulence. Look around you. We are not alone, we are stronger together. His words resonated within me, and I felt my own uncertainty begin to shift. Could love and compassion truly create a barrier against the growing shadows encroaching upon us? Could we push back against the tide of hatred threatening to drown out our voices? Collective energy surged through the frightened mass of bodies, a ripple of determination unspooling as we regained focus not just on ourselves but on one another. Danny stepped closer to my side, his presence a steadying force amidst the tumult, while I felt the warmth of Eva still tightly clutching my hand. "We can't let fear win," she exclaimed, her voice a beacon amidst the rising storm. With every pulse of unity running through us, I began to see the shadows retreat slightly, the darkness momentarily faltering against the unwavering bonds of love and acceptance we clung to. We were on the brink of something powerful, and as the faces around me lit with fervor, I shouted alongside them, "We are not here for hate, we are here for each other." Just as hope began to flourish, I met my father's gaze, and a rift opened within me. Chaos and anger mingled in his expression, and a flicker of recognition sparked remnants of love intertwined with the shadows of expectations. "This is wrong," I shouted over the frenetic noise. "You taught me to stand by my friends, to embrace those in pain. Can't you see? Unity is our strength." But instead of the anger I feared, something unexpected surfaced in his eyes, a glimmer of the father I had once known, caught in the fray of his own disillusionment. For a fleeting moment, I thought I detected a softening, a possibility that perhaps love could infiltrate even the most hardened hearts. In that brief connection, fury combusted into confusion, sending waves through the crowd. I sensed doubt infiltrating the anger-fueled atmosphere that had consumed us. "Stand with us," I implored, urging him to let go of all that anger, of all that hatred etched into his being. "Reject their darkness. Let go of what you've clung to for so long, because love is always stronger." And suddenly a stillness fell over the tumult, an eerie quiet interrupted only by the sound of panting breaths and muted whispers. In hesitant moments, the crowd pulsated with palpable fear and anticipation, clinging to the hope that somehow acceptance would sway the tides of hatred. An unexpected silence lingered, heavy with unspoken thought stretching across the air, and then, with a sudden clarity, my father's voice broke through, quivering with vulnerability. "It's too late. You don't understand." No, I shouted, the weight of hope rising up in me, louder than fear. "It's not too late. We can change this together." With every ounce of strength within me, I stepped boldly toward him, breaking free from my own fear, unwilling to let my father slip from reach without fighting for something better. If love can bloom from hate, it can heal the divisions we have created. We must open our hearts, and then it happened like a dam bursting open in an unrelenting flood. For just a split second, the air crackled with energy, the energy of resolve and unshakable belief. People began to step forward, fueled by our collective yearning for unity, and the stream of defiance surged among us as voices melded into a triumphant chorus, echoing through the clash of shadows. They rallied beside me, Jamie, Danny, Eva, and even those I barely knew. We were all in this together, our voices lifting like a symphony to drown out the remnants of anger still hanging heavy in the air. Together, we cried into the night, a united force against the encroaching darkness. The defenders hesitated, caught off guard by the ferocity igniting in our hearts, but I knew it wasn't merely about them anymore. It was about love, defiance, and unity, all woven together like a shimmering thread that echoed back to all the shared laughter, the moments we had woven, amidst the acrid loneliness that had once held us captive. "Face your fears," I urged, my voice resolute. "The power of love is far stronger than the chains of hate. You know this to be true." And just as the fight surged forward above the rising din, mingling pain with promise, I glimpsed my father stepping forward, torn between the dark shadows of expectation and the fierce light of love. He hesitated, then looked around. I saw the conflict pull at him like a violent storm. There it was, the final realization blooming within those once enclosed walls, the understanding that he was not alone. The sudden spark ignited self-awareness in him as he stood paralyzed, gripped by the rawness of the moment. Perhaps in this unveiling of love, he would finally grasp that the walls he had built were teetering on the precipice of collapse, held together only by fear's suffocating embrace. Against the violent backdrop of shadows, I felt my heart open wider, ready to embrace all that thus far lay hidden. I raised my voice one last time, both pleading and resolute. Love allows us to break free. We want you, we want all of you. It is our remedy. And as those powerful words shattered the darkness, a tremor rippled through the collective heart of our community, pushing against the boundaries that once defined us. As one by one faces began to light with understanding and acceptance, I sensed the storm shifting love breaking through the barriers carefully constructed over the years, and for the first time, it felt like forgiveness and acceptance could truly take root. In that chaotic embrace of unity, I turned just in time to see my father, the hardened lines of his face softening, vulnerability rising to meet our radiant resolve. It was a fragile, beautiful moment, the potential for forgiveness suspended in the air like the hiss of summer rain. There we stood, on the brink of something transformative, daring to forge a new path together, and then it happened. The shadows faltered, allowing the light to flood through as our renewed voices surged like a wave rising up against the darkness. We stood, hands clasped, hearts beating strong, a tapestry fueled by love's resilience woven to stand firm against the illness of fear. Together, we cried as one, for within that unity lay a promise not just to survive but to thrive, a promise to build something stronger, something boundless. I felt my father's gaze shift toward me, a small shift of understanding passing between us, as if he were willing to embrace the truth that bound us all, that love was powerful, and it could, indeed, bloom from hate. And in that beautiful moment of connection, I finally understood, love, in all its forms, was a lifelong battle, but one worth fighting for. Together, we would stand, and against all odds, we would forge ahead undeterred, a united family, a community cocooned in compassion, nurturing growth as we moved past the bitterness of yesterday. As the dust settled and the world around us shifted, I vowed silently to cherish this moment twinged with truth. And perhaps, in this journey marked by unending love, we would embrace the winds of change and become stronger, because in the end, it was always about love, the heart's tireless persistence to push through and find triumph even in the darkest corners. And as I turned my gaze to the sky, whispering a silent promise into the vastness, my heart swelled with a truth I carried forward: even in the darkest times, love can always bloom anew.